right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Redevelopment Commission meeting on March the 20th, 2023. First item of business is roll call.
Deborah Meyerson here.
Deb Hutton. Oh, Deb Hutton here.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman here.
Randy Cassidy here.
Cindy Canarney here. Staff present?
John Zodi with the Hand Department.
Christina Finley, Hand Department.
Larry Allen Legal.
All right. Next item on the agenda is reading of the minutes for March the 6th, 2023. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Deborah Meyerson will make a motion to approve the minutes of March 6, 2023.
I'll second.
I need a vote via roll call, please.
Deb Hutton here. Yes, aye.
Deborah Meyerson, yes.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Cindy Canarney, yes. Minutes pass. Next item on the agenda is examination of claims for March 17th, 2023 for $496,686.29. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I have a couple questions. Our $250,000 is showing ARPA COPID local field recovery. What exactly is that? Fiscal recovery.
What is that?
I can't pull anything.
Oh, let me see the packet there, Randy.
It's
Who is the vendor?
that's my question in regards to it. It says G21005. Program G21005, ARPA COVID local fiscal.
Looks like it would be some of our COVID community development block grant funds. Let me,
Is that just switching from one account to the other?
can you, what was the code again?
Let's see, the code is Winslow Ranch account. The account's 53990, and it's program G21005.
Well, let me search.
Yep.
So,
Look on
And it's
here.
COVID local fiscal recovery.
There.
And
Oh, it's
it
the
says
ARPA.
Social media services for him.
Yep.
Well, that's the 580. I just, is that
Yeah.
cumulative total where it's just where it's the 250,000 is? Oh, Summit Hill. Never mind.
That was
see
the
it now.
$250,000.
Yep, got it now. It's your Summit Hill.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that was that was just to give you a little more detail. That was $250,000 we committed to Summit Hill Community Development Corporation of ARPA money, American Rescue Plan dollars, to help with the creation of the community land trust that they're doing. So
Is that the community land trust at the existing facility, or is that additional?
it's a community land trust that will be just throughout the city. It's operational support for Summit Hill to help facilitate the creation of the land trust.
Okay, there's not one specific location for that. That's overall.
That's correct.
So it's seed money to start it.
Exactly.
Is exactly what it is. Okay, so it's primarily for administrative issues to get
That's right.
started is what it comes down to.
Yep.
Okay, and then the other question I had in regards to it was where we're going over, it's just part of the CBDG grant for cooperative housing, and then our Hoosier House, those are just predetermined
That's
monies
physical
that were
improvements.
given through grants.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions on examination of claims? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Deb Hutton, I'll move to accept the claims of March 17th, 2023.
I apologize, can I ask one more
Sure.
question on that? I was looking at the 4 bills from Otis Elevator in regards to the trade district, and the question I had in regards to that was, is that not something that would still be under a warranty issue from installation?
We did go round and round with them about that particular thing. What they had claimed was, and I think what we had found was substantial, is that it was actually a worn out part already that wasn't somehow covered under warranty. That was a question I had too about the elevator maintenance, and I don't remember the specific part, so I could let me go back and I can ask. It would be our parking team, because they oversaw some of that construction in the garages, which part it was, because I don't remember off the top of my head, Commissioner.
Yeah, the concern I had was it's 4 continuations of the same thing, and given the time frame of what this garage has been built, what's our ongoing expenses when, yeah.
We anticipate it should be as fully functional as possible, but I'll follow up with the parking department, see if I can get you more details.
Yeah, I just want to know why they're continually charging,
Yeah.
if it's just one time. Okay. Sorry, apologize, we got a motion.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Hutton. Is there a second?
Sarah Bowerly Dansman, I'll second.
And we have a first and a second. I need a vote via roll call, please.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Deborah Meyerson, yes.
Sarah Bowerly Dansman, yes.
Yes, Randy Cassidy, yes.
Cindy Canarney, yes. Next item of business is examination of payroll registers for March 10th, 2023 for $37,123.98. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'm good.
Deborah Meyerson, I'll make a motion to accept the examination of payroll registers for March 10th.
Deb Hutton, I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Vote via roll call, please.
Deb Hutton, aye.
Deborah Meyerson, yes.
Sarah Bowerly Dansman, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Cindy Canarney, yes. Next item of business is reports of officers and committees. Is there a director's report?
There is, Madam President. First, let me welcome our new member from the MCCSE Board of School Trustees, Aaron Cooperman. So the board is, as members know, and just so the public knows, has an appointment to the RDC from the school corporation that serves the jurisdiction. And so trustees Cooperman and Aaron Wyatt are going to be jointly serving on the RDC. So they'll sort of interchangeably come to meetings and have trustee Cooperman here with us. So I want to welcome her, and we will keep you informed and be glad to have you with input from the school board. So I don't know if you want to say anything, Madam President, if now or later would work, but.
I don't really have much to say other than thanks for having me here. I'm excited to learn more. I guess I should say I just got back from Scotland last night, so I feel like I'm only half here. So I'll be more engaged next time, I promise.
Awesome, welcome.
Welcome, appreciate having you.
Thank you.
As far as other business goes, our home ARP allocation plan that you all provided input on will come down from public comment tomorrow and will be submitted to HUD by the end of the week. I want to thank you again for your comments. We rounded out consultation on that last week, and I think we have a good plan to submit. We are still working on filling staff vacancies in hand with an assistant director and a program manager position, as well as a neighborhood compliance officer. So the HR process is rolling in different stages with all three of those. And then our annual action plan for HUD to facilitate the expenditure of our community development block grant dollars and our home dollars it's up for public comment now as well, and will be up until April 10th. And then we'll submit that to HUD by April 15th. So that's up for public comment on the website, in the lobby, at the library, and asking people to submit comments to the hand email address or to give us a call if they have any questions or comments about that. So that concludes my report. I do have something under the business development report that I can either do now or when you get there.
Go ahead, Derek.
So Mr. Crowley wanted me to let all of you know he's not able to attend tonight, but he did want to follow up on your at a recent meeting. We approved a right of entry for the 4th Street Garage to facilitate an art exhibit. And that is now open. I'll just read this briefly, and then I can send it to members. I wanted to let everyone know the One Drop Art exhibit is open at the 4th Street Garage, southernmost commercial space. It will remain open until May 10th. The gallery hours are Thursdays and Fridays from 3 to 6 and Saturdays from 1 to 4. He told me today it's an exciting exhibit they have. And just let ESD know if you have questions, but I'll forward you a summary. But that is happening after you all approve the right of entry there. So, yep.
Great.
Yep. So we're moving along. So that concludes my report, unless there are any questions.
When do you think you'll be fully staffed?
Hopefully within a month. We've completed interviews for program manager and neighborhood compliance officer. Assistant director posting closes tomorrow. So it's rolling at a pretty good pace, but just a lot to do to get in there. Yep.
All right, thank you. Is there a legal report?
Yeah, just a couple of items for the commissioners. The first one, I just want to draw your attention to. We received an invoice for some work that was done at College Square. It's actually with Cassidy Electrical. It was for some upgrades to the electrical system. I'll be bringing a resolution at the next one, but those upgrades were more than $5,000, so just over $5,000. $5,635.09. So I just wanted to alert the commission to that. That work had already been completed because the quote for the repairs was under the $5,000 mark, but when you added labor, it went over that amount that requires your approval. So we just wanted to bring that to your attention, just to let you know that the work's been done, but we'll bring a resolution for you all to ratify that upgrade to the College Square. And it really was, it's to the electrical system as a whole to kind of improve the way the system was not holding the load from all the tenants, including the fire department, very well. So there were some necessary upgrades to that needed to be made. So that's the first item. The second item is in regard to, hang on just a second here. Resolution 2325, and I sent this around in an email, but just to memorialize for the public, we had originally scheduled an executive session today for 4:30, but I had neglected to put the notice out into the atrium, which is required under Indiana's open door law. And so as a result, we canceled that meeting. Part of that discussion was also going to be some of the elements around the negotiations of 2325. So what we have decided to do is to pull that from the agenda tonight and postpone until our April 3rd meeting and hold those discussions together. So we will plan on scheduling and noticing a 4:30 executive session, and hopefully you all are available. We'll have Christina, because Christina's actually good at this as opposed to me, reach out to each of you to make sure that you're available and ready for that. But I just wanted to give you a heads up of the change in the agenda for this evening.
All right, thank you. Is there a treasurer's report?
No report tonight, thank you.
And Mr. Zodi did the business development updates, so we'll move on to new business.
Can I just ask one question?
Yes.
So I noticed that, so we're postponing 23-25. There's no 23-26.
There was at the last meeting. So
Okay, I wasn't here
2325 was a placeholder, and then a new agenda item while I was out of town got added, and so it just didn't get replaced in the numbers. So you actually approved a 2326, which I believe was a plat amendment, and then this was just left as a placeholder. So I didn't want to waste any numbers, so we just kept 2325. And it'll be 2325 the next time, so I apologize for the confusion, but.
Just wanted to make sure that there
Absolutely.
wasn't something missing.
All right, let's move on to resolution 23-27, approval of match funding for resurfacing of Winslow. Who'd like to speak to this?
Good evening, Matt Smothers with the engineering department. The Winslow project will include the resurfacing of Winslow from Walnut to Allendale Drive. It also will include the installation of ADA compliant curb ramps at 5 intersections and make improvements to some damaged sections of sidewalk and improve safety at the Winslow-Allendale intersection. City received 2 bids for this project, with the low bid being from Milestone Contractors in the amount of $474,712. The Board of Public Works approved the contract with Milestone at their meeting last week. The funding for this project comes from a community crossing grant, which requires a 50-50 split on the local match. The local matching funds would come from the consolidated TIF, with the 50% match being an amount not to exceed of $237,356. Can answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Question I have in regards to that, this area is not necessarily in our TIF area. It's adjoining to our TIF area?
Part of it is in the TIF, and then part of it is just adjoining to the TIF. So the function here, or the primary reason why you can pay for this out of consolidated TIF funds is if it's in or serving the TIF, the public improvements, we see this as serving the TIF. We've worked with this particular area already to upgrade some of the multimodal transportation, so specifically widening the sidewalk and the access that was partially out of the TIF and partially in the TIF when you go into Henderson and things like that. So this is kind of a similar a similar section. Some of the intersection improvements here are technically outside of the TIF, but we see them as serving the TIF because they're part of that same improvement along there.
Serving the TIF, and then when we look at this dollar amount, we need that match in order to get the crossing grant, is what we're looking at.
I believe so.
Yeah, no, that's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, we won't be refunding the TIF from anything else. This is just literally the city's match that comes from the TIF in order to get this project into reality.
That's correct.
Because we don't have enough public work dollars to make that occur.
That's correct.
Okay.
Is there a particular radius that serving the TIF? Because this comes up on a fairly regular basis, and I'm just trying to get a better sense if there's an actual definition that applies. If it hits the perimeter, is that what that means, or kind of how does that definition function?
Yeah, so let me just start by, it's not defined in statute what that means. So what we've looked for stuff like this, is it really connected to the TIF, particularly when it's a corridor? Who lives there? How's the corridor access? Is that a business access that might improve some of that commercial development of the TIF? So that's kind of one aspect. We've seen this as part of that. I will say there have been some parks projects. For instance, we have a Griffey Dam project that's outside of the TIF. And the reason why we believe like something like that, not to get too far afield, is serving the TIF that's a little bit different than like the main corridor of infrastructure, is because of how it can attract economic development and kind of development inside the TIF. So is this an attraction that is used by people within the consolidated TIF and is a feature that you might hold up when you're promoting the economic development of the consolidated TIF? So those are kind of the factors. There are of course more factors to look for, but those are kind of the primary like basic factors. Is it connected if we're talking about pure infrastructure and it's going to support that, or is it an element that might be used by people within the consolidated TIF and promote the economic development there?
If it's the more abstract in terms of the latter, is there ever any retro, like kind of look back to see, like how would you quantify that? Is there any way to just apply that more strategically, just because it is a little fuzzy?
So ahead of time, usually the questions we ask are, is it something that's actually used? So is there numbers about how many people who might live within that consolidated TIF or the main city area really use that particular feature? So again, Griffey's kind of an outlier because it's the only lake really that's owned and operated by the city. We have a park system there. It's kind of unique in that kind of feature. Almost every other project, I'm trying to think of some like other exceptions, maybe they would be park exceptions, but they're almost always connected to or within the TIF. We try to keep it geographically tight.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just a quick question. If we didn't approve this project wouldn't happen.
Well, we wouldn't receive the community crossing grant.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah.
So we'd lose, significant hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to make this project, which improves a roadway, which is a main corridor for our community. Okay.
And not just the roadway, I mean also kind of some of the intersection safety and also some of the ADA ramps that are along there as well.
Yeah, because that particular section does have a lot of usage.
Yes, it does.
And it's a dangerous, that is kind of a dangerous intersection. I have two questions. So one is, when we initially approved the resolution last year for a project review, we, at that point, provided a local match of up to $500,000. So this is coming in significantly below that. So I'm just kind of curious for more information about why it came in so far below our initial resolution. And then the second is, could you provide some more information regarding the ADA compliance and accessibility and safety considerations? I'm thinking in particular, where does it end? Like, if you go past Allendale down toward the goat farm, there's only stairs, right? So is there going to be something that replaces the stairs, or is there going to be something, or is that not included in the scope of the project? So that.
Well, my first question, our engineer's estimate was for $600,000, and the bid came in at $474,000. So we were extremely happy with that. On the second question, this project ends it's either 100 or 150 feet east of the Allendale intersection, so the stairs aren't included in this portion.
Can you speak to kind of the sidewalk improvements?
Sure. There's a section of sidewalk on the south side of Winslow, close to Highland. There were several trees right next to the sidewalk there, and the roots grew underneath and heaved the sidewalk up. The trees have been removed, so now we'll replace that sidewalk. And I don't know the exact distance, it's around 150 feet worth of
Is
sidewalk.
it gonna get wider?
And it'll be same width as it
Same,
was,
okay.
just right now it's, damaged from when the roots got underneath it, so.
Okay. All right, any other questions on resolution 23-27? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. I need a vote via roll call, please.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Deborah Meyerson, yes.
Sarah Bowerly Dansman, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
And Cindy Canarney, yes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is resolution 23-28, approval of funding for construction of Griffey Dam Crossing Project. If you'd like to speak to us regarding this.
Tim Street and Parks. City engineer.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I am Tim Street. I'm the Operations Director with Bloomington Parks. Nice to be with you again this evening. So tonight we have a contract with Scenic Construction Services in the amount not to exceed $344,700 to complete the Griffey Dam Trail Crossing project, which was conceptually approved in Resolution 22-63 last year. This will construct approximately 850 feet of trail construction and fence across the top of the Griffey Dam, as well as construction of an approximately 200-foot-long staircase down to the parking lot below the dam, creating another access point and helping us fulfill another stage of the Griffey Loop Trail project, which is ongoing, and we hope to complete sometime next year with the entirety being an approximate 6-mile loop around the west part of Griffey Lake. I'm happy to answer any questions. I will also mention this will go before the Board of Park Commissioners next Tuesday for contract approval. So we're just the opposite order from the previous agenda item in terms of which meeting came first. This is under budget. This is within the project budget that was authorized. And this is also a project that was sort of dually authorized, but at the bottom of the list of the latest transportation and transportation bond that was approved in 2022. And if there are funds available at the end of that bond series, the plan is to reimburse. I do not know if they will be or not, but it just depends on how the bond series goes.
All right.
So essentially, the area you're talking about is across the dam.
Correct.
And then
Down.
stops stairways down to our gravel parking lot and our other dog park.
The old dog park.
Old dog park, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
And then at some point, we'll finish connecting on up Dunn Street.
Well, that is a project that is in Planning and Transportation's hands, is looking at, and that was another part of that bond, actually, was looking at potential design for a path along Dunn Street. That could potentially get to Tamarack and beyond, to the southwest corner of Griffey. It could potentially go past that. I haven't been too involved with details there, so I would defer to Planning and Transportation on that aspect. The other thing that we, as a Parks Department, have going on is the improvements of the actual hiking trail itself around the lake. And so the first phase was that we completed the causeway on the east side along Headley Road, if you've been out there lately.
Looks wonderful.
Thank you. The second phase is this, and then the third phase is the actual trail company coming in and making the trail improvements.
Connecting the
make
primitive
it-
trail that we have.
Not capital A accessible, but more accessible. It's quite steep, eroded, dealing with some of the issues from decades of use out there. Yeah.
Okay. And the plan we have right now, we're still fencing off the dam area where.
Correct, yes.
there's
This
no-
plan does have a chain link fence around the more sensitive areas where there's the actual spillway, and then split rail fence along the dam on both sides to prevent.
Okay, so you'll be able to have an observation point looking
Correct.
out without having to look through a chain link fence.
And we also hope this helps give people a lot more access to Griffey. In the summer, we often experience that the parking lot at Griffey is packed and full, and there's nowhere to park. And so we're hoping that by building this trail and increasing access to quality trails with parking, with a trailhead, we'll be able to give people greater access to the amenities out there.
Yeah, will you be improving the lower parking area where the plant used to be? or-
Not across the street where the water plant was, but on the north side of the street, or, well, northeast. I don't think it's quite square there. We actually already have made some improvements just internally, recently on the parking lot drainage
So we'll
to
still
make it better.
leave it into a crushed stone situation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, a little
So we
difficult
have
to make
quite a-
further improvements down there because of some floodplain issues.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good. And then time frame to get this complete?
Oh, yes, sorry, I should have mentioned. We anticipate a notice to proceed in May, and work is to be complete by September.
Okay.
Mhm.
So in time for everybody to get back and
Hopefully get some fall color.
get their color going.
It's definitely nice to hear that it came in under budget.
I love those two words together as well. Doesn't
Yes.
happen often.
All right, good.
So at our last meeting where we discussed this, I believe if I recall correctly, that Mr. Underwood said that that he did not think that this would be reimbursed, that there would not be money to reimburse out of the bond. So I'm just curious if he still has that assessment.
Good evening, Jeff Underwood. Yes, I still have that same assessment. We just had an update on the bond projects today, and I don't anticipate that there will be any money.
And is there some, I think that the discussion about kind of how to use the TIF in the context of it kind of not being, if it's not directly in the TIF, is a useful concept. I do think that when we think about economic development, we have to think about quality of life, and things like this project help raise the quality of life in the area. I'm wondering if we have good data on kind of usage and kind of anything that would back up this kind of general intuition that that increasing park services is helpful for economic development in the area.
Yeah, great thought. I know we've done some similar comparisons with things like Switchyard, for example, which obviously derives development directly around it. A little bit of a different scenario. We don't want development right around the edges of Griffey Lake necessarily because it's a nature preserve. That said, we have talked about and have a lot of interest in, as we formalize the new trail and finish it, installing some things like trail counters and things like that so we can get some better data on the increased use. We know, for example, right now, the only people who are using some of the rugged trail on the west and southwest corner of Lake Griffey are people who are willing to really take on some rugged trail and who are willing to do a little bit of self-navigating. So by opening that up to the greater public, we would love to put like a trail counter out there and see exactly what that impact is.
I think that would be great.
Is there any way to consider other modes of access? I'm only thinking because TIF districts, in terms of being established, are often based on not just economic development, but also the incomes of the households that live in that district. And if it's only reachable by car, it's not that accessible. And I'm just, obviously Griffey is one specific example. There's a whole park system that has differing arrays of access by different modes of transportation. I'm just trying to, again, connect the more abstract idea of how it serves the TIF district as well as the overall quality of life in the community, and just trying to get a sense of how that connection is further strengthened in terms of the rationale of using TIF funds.
Sure. Well, another way to access that area would be potentially the future Dunn Street improvements as we work on connections north to there for the Blue Ridge neighborhood, for Griffey, for that area. And then currently the Cascades Trail System does end at the old water treatment plant there. And so from there you could connect all the way over to the Cascades Golf Course, essentially. And I can't say that I can speak to the condition of sidewalks along Kinzer right now off the top of my head, but so I'm not sure what's along Kinzer there in terms of further connectivity beyond that. Yeah, so those would be
It
alternate
run all the
ways.
way down there, and would have loved to have a way to connect back up through that, because there is really good sidewalks all the way from all the way down through that way.
when you look at Cascades and we have our, poor man's water slide that gets utilized, there's a lot of individuals that we might say of the economic aspect that also continue to take walks up and down through Cascades and then work their way up.
Absolutely.
And by the bicycle.
Of course, that continues to be an area that we look at for
Yeah.
increased connectivity in the future.
Which helps because that is, multiple people down there in the summer. There's utilization. Griffey used to be the swimming place, and I doubt if you'll ever be able to get that back, but it would be wonderful if you could ever utilize some of the open swimming that used to occur in Griffey.
Well, a lot of the erosion and issues we're dealing with as part of the trails is from decades of use as that.
And I think from a quality of life perspective, you could probably ask any employer who's trying to recruit folks to Bloomington that the park system and that investment that the community's made is one of the features that they leverage on a routine basis to attract talent to work at various businesses in Bloomington. So I do see the connectivity between this project and the TIF. I hear about it all the time from local business.
Quality of life.
Yes.
Would you like a motion?
So are there any other questions on Resolution 23-28? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Randy Cassidy, I'll make a motion to approve.
Sarah
Deb
Bauer.
Cottonell.
Go ahead, Deb.
Deb Cottonell, second. Thanks, Sarah.
All right, we have a first and a second. I need a vote via roll call, please.
Deb Cotton, yes.
Deborah Meyerson, yes.
Sarah Bowerly Danson, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Cindy Canarney, yes. Next item of business is Resolution 23-29, approval of project review and approval form for a Regional Economic Acceleration and Development Initiative grant for Hopewell.
If I may just off the top, John, you can go ahead and present, but I just want to note, there should be a correction to this title. This is actually the approval of the READY grant agreement itself, not just the project review and approval form. So any motion should amend that title just to reflect that from the most accuracy. Sorry, John, I didn't mean to.
No, please, that's great. Well, I'll just introduce it here. So as the commissioners may remember, we had applied for a grant for the construction of about 350 feet of Jackson Street at the Hopewell project. So this street would be just north of the existing core building, coming off of First Street, running east to the parking garage to the new University Street to the north. So it's kind of an H, that 350 section bit of street for Jackson Street to be newly constructed. So Hand and the engineering department worked together on putting together the application for the grant, which was approved. And we're very happy to get $1.8 million for this project. And what you have before you tonight is the contract from the state. So this went through the local Regional Opportunities Initiative Board. From there, it went up to the state administration for approval there. And so this contract, Larry can comment as well as, I don't want to call it a template, but it's largely a template from the state for all READY projects, and quite lengthy as you know. But we had a meeting on that last week with the folks from ROI, Regional Opportunities Initiative, and this is the next step. So we'd like to get your approval on this so we can move ahead. Mr. Durkis from engineering, answer questions as well if you have anything on the sort of logistical side on the project itself. But happy to bring this to you. This is a result of some work by the city here that will help Hopewell keep pushing ahead.
Questions?
Just quickly.
Deb?
Deb.
These are very practical, two practical questions rather than questions about the project itself or the READY grant. On the very last page, 159 of our packet, Exhibit B, I have two questions regarding numbers. One is the first, there's steps and descriptions right above the approval line, and there's steps go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. So do I presume that the second 4 should truly be step 5? That's question number 1.
That's correct.
Okay, question number 2 is, just above that in another text box, financial information, sources of funds. This READY is there with $1,800,000. Then the consolidated TIF is crossed out and increased to $5,239,000. and $50, $239,050. So you go down below into the new step 5, other related Hopewell construction for March. Should that remain as $5,039,130 or be increased to $5,239,050?
It should remain as is. So the estimation of the Jackson Street construction itself was the 1.999 million fund, and so because we only received 1.8 million from Ready, we took that money that would have to be covered for that estimate of the full cost of the project and shifted that back over to TIF funds. Now the rest of those TIF funds really were the broader match, as John talked about, where we talked about how much we're putting into the development as a whole, both on Phase 1 East and the main hospital site. So the top line is just to reflect that we may have to use more TIF funds for the completion of Jackson Street, but it doesn't change the mix of the misnumbered table below.
Because that's truly just the Ready numbers.
Well, because it includes all of Jackson Street together, and then it also includes that match as well. So the match kind of stays the same, but the Jackson Street stays the same. It's just the mix of which funds pay for which has changed a little bit.
Okay, it doesn't totally make sense to me, but maybe it does to others. Thanks, Larry.
Well, and this gets it going in regards to the engineering and what needs to be done in regards to starting the project as a whole, irrespective of what we have, because without this Ready grant, we wouldn't be moving forward anyway.
Yeah, we also don't know what these numbers are going to come in at. So what you see on the project review form aren't necessarily, and Patrick can either cringe or correct me if I'm wrong, but this isn't approval of any of these agreements yet. We still have to put this out to bid like we would any other project. So those final construction numbers will come in, and this will shift based on what we get. What we do know is we're getting 1.8 million from Ready to pay for part of this project. What we don't know is the final cost of what that project will be.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
One quick question. Is ROI administering this, or is the city going to be administering this particular grant?
Both. So we will administer the project itself, which will require us to submit the invoices through a system to ROI, and then ROI has a portal that they submit everything from us in. They're sort of I don't want to call them a middleman, but a go-between with the state. Then the state will pay them back for the funds that we expend. So
Okay, so it'll be a two-part situation. The administration and acquisition of these Ready funds will be administered through the city at our consistent cost basis, and then ROI's expense will be reimbursed through the state and won't be deducted from this 1.8.
are you talking about it? Sorry, Larry, did you?
I think it would. So what it would, we'd probably have to pay the invoice up front with city funds, and then ROI reimburses us, and that will start to cut down. And once we've reached 1.8 from Ready or ROI, they are done funding the rest of that project. Now we have to give them an estimate throughout the project and at the beginning of the project. So once we get these bids in, we have to share basically all of the bid documents with them and how we went about that. We kind of have an advantage over some private actors because honestly, the laws that we have to follow are in some ways more stringent, right? We're used to dealing with these kind of things. We have to put this out to bid, so we really just have to submit what we're already required to do by law. But it will, as they reimburse us, that 1.8 will kind of shrink down as what's available for the funds. But one of the requirements is that we continue to work and communicate with ROI and the state IEDC to kind of give them the full amount of the project, how much local funds we'll have to put in, whether we're capable of finishing the project with the funds as allocated, things like that. Sorry, I hope that answers.
No, that answers the question. I just wanted to know what the actual delta was when we got down and Patrick's looking for the dollars to finish this public project. So
we really don't know that until we receive bids. So if it comes back at 2 million, we've already got 1.8 of the 2, and we'd have to come up with 200,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just because we've had that other bid that came back way over budget, is there any expectation that that's going to shift this particular bid as well? Or how you're dealing with that?
Patrick, do you have an answer? I'll defer to the engineer.
Hi, Patrick Durkis with the engineering department. I definitely share your concern. The estimate that was put together for this project used the most current bid prices that we had at the time, and then also put in a sizable contingency. I will say our most recent data point on this was the Winslow project, which came in significantly under our engineered estimate, which used very similar unit prices. In addition, the Jackson Street project is much more straightforward of a project. It is going to be an asphalt road, concrete curb and gutter, standard storm system with standard sidewalk. The Hopewell project, Phase 1 East, is it's unique that it's large enough and has enough infrastructure that it requires a certain size contractor. But then it has a lot of specialty pieces that.
Is that the one that has like the weird grading issues that are the problem on that site?
Actually, the main hospital site, it has the most grading that's going to be required, and that is part of this ROI grant will fund an overall layout of the whole hospital site, and then focus in on just the Jackson Street portion needed to serve the core building development, and then also provide utilities to extend on to all other developments in that area.
Well, let's hope that our most recent bids that came in under is an indication that inflation has ended.
So, I would say no to that, but.
I hope it's a trend.
There we go.
And all this money is allocated towards Jackson Street.
All the ready grant money.
Yep, all the ready grants specifically to Jackson Street. That's right. And then we just gotta get Second Street up, or First Street up there, we'll be fine. Okay, all
How's
right.
that? All right, any other questions on resolution 23-29? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I've done 3, who's next?
I'll do one. Sarah Bauer-Lee-Desmond, I motion to approve resolution 23-29.
Okay, Randy Cassidy, I'll second.
All right, we have a first and a second. I need a vote via roll call, please.
Deb Hutton, yes?
Deborah Meyerson, yes.
Sarah Bauer-Lee-Desmond, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
And Cindy Canarney, yes. Next item of business is any business or general discussion items.
Can I, if I may,
Please.
I omitted something from my report, and I just want to go back and touch on this, which is,
Also, I'm sorry, I should have motioned to approve that with the amended,
Okay.
the amended change of the title.
we can, did anybody misunderstand that they were voting on wrong title, or is
I
it?
corrected the title of my packet.
Okay, so I think we'll be okay. We'll just
Okay.
note that for the minutes is that it was approved as amended with the title. I think everybody understood that,
Okay.
so I appreciate that. Thank you,
Yep.
Commissioner.
Thanks.
2 things just for general discussion. One, just something I omitted, which is recently the Bloomington Municipal Facilities Corporation, which is a nonprofit. They were a nonprofit that held a lot of property. We used it as a lease purchase agreement throughout the city on a variety of projects, including the building that we're currently in, City Hall, the police station headquarters, 3rd Street widening of the intersection at 3rd and Kirkwood, and that kind of weird Adams intersection that we have there around Rose Hill Cemetery, and then also the convention center parking lot. Those bonds have all been paid off, and pursuant to the terms of the bonds, some of that property reverts back to its original owner. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up, and we'll try to bring something formal to you. I just wanted to let you know the BMFC approved the completion of that transfer for you all, so you all would be receiving back the convention center parking lot as part of your property rolls, and then also some of that right of way along 3rd Street potentially just under the terms of the bond agreement. So I just want to give you a notice of that. Things like City Hall and the police department were originally from the city generally, so that'll go back onto like the Board of Public Works kind of normal city rolls of property. So that was the first thing.
How do you define what it was? Was that in the particular lease agreements each time? Because, you know, the fire station, police station, 3rd Street, each one of them spelled out whether it was redevelopment or if it was.
That's exactly
the city in general.
So there was a bond issuance, and then there was also a lease agreement to lease it back to the city that was entered into. All of those lease agreements specified who would get the property.
Now, do we close out BMFC when this is all done?
They don't, yeah, so they don't own anything now, and there's no outstanding bonds. So there's really nothing for them to do. They've been a really great source within the community, and that was a great function that they served for a long time. I mean, a lot of important projects, but for the foreseeable future, unless that changes, I mean, I can't tell you forever and ever that there's nothing for them to do, but we don't foresee that there's any other business for them to do.
But that entity will still stay in place in case we need it as a community.
Or it might, you know, the statutes have largely moved on, so likely what it would be cleaner is just to set up an entity that's under the new statutes that kind of supports that. And we may have the same actors, because obviously individuals are always very active in the community, but I don't know if it'll be the BMFC for sure, but that's above my pay grade, of course,
Oh,
to
no,
make
it's fine.
that
I just,
decision.
I was curious because of entities that get formed and then, you know,
Yeah.
as they close out, we find, you know, it's like, well, this used to be this, and now it's hard to clean up over a period of years.
And that's kind of the interesting thing also about the development of the statutes and how the statutes keep changing from thing to thing to thing, because, you know, cities and municipalities were so limited on the way we fund these projects. And so over the years, the General Assembly has found ways of patching that temporarily, but it changes every few years. And so the method of how we've done that has changed over time. And of course, usually Mr. Underwood corrects me because he's been around so long that he's seen all these changes firsthand, whereas I just read about them in textbooks. So I know relatively nothing, and Jeff knows everything.
Nice.
So.
So Larry, can you tell me again the parking lot for the convention center, where exactly that is, that the RDC will now own?
So you already own a piece of
Yeah.
it. You own the piece immediately behind the convention center. What we're talking about are, actually, let me correct that. You own the lots that are to the south of the convention center. There are 2 lots that the RDC already owns. The piece of it is right behind the convention center, so the large parking lot that's immediately behind the hotel area, that is owned in the BMFC name, so that's what would be coming over. What I anticipate doing is I'll put this on a map for you so you can actually see these properties and see where they are, so that you
Yeah,
know
I think
what's
that'd be super
coming onto the
helpful.
rules.
All right, anything else for general discussion?
I have a question. I saw recently that state code for redevelopment commission says that the redevelopment commission should be approving and adopting a list of real property and interests to be acquired and the price to be offered to the owner of each parcel of interest. And I didn't recall how we had incorporated that into our examination of such real estate interests, and wanted to know how that's interpreted and done at the local level.
Yeah. So let me give you 2 things. First of all, obviously that relates to the potential purchase of 2325. I think it was raised in that context. One of the things I think we've offered to do is to bring in both corporation counsel and outside counsel for you at your next meeting to be resources for you to talk through some of that process. Generally, though, when we're talking about that list, so the statute's evolved over the years. So part of it is that in the formation of the TIF, we kind of set out potential project areas. And what that started out as is the Redevelopment Commission would exercise eminent domain itself. So it had its own authority to exercise eminent domain. And that's where the list really came in, is like once you are going to eminent domain a particular project area, the way to give notice of what the list of properties would be to put it on a unified list. Now, some people have suggested that it needs to be published, and it doesn't. What the statute does say is it needs to be adopted, right, by the Redevelopment Commission. The way, in consultation, the way we've done it and the way most redevelopment commissions have done it in consultation with our outside counsel is when we're talking about the other ways that redevelopment commissions can acquire property that are outside the eminent domain, because the statute has now changed. You do not have the authority to independently do eminent domain. That has to go through city council and the city generally. However, the other ways that you acquire property, which includes by negotiation and private sale, what we've said is like, how is that supposed to function? Well, we look to the rest of that statute in terms of we do try to follow the dictates of the rest of that statute, which is you have to get 2 independent appraisals. You have to give you can offer the average of the 2 appraisals. Anything above the average of the 2 appraisals has to be explicitly approved by the RDC. The reason why that works this way is so twofold. One is just the way private negotiations work, and the fact that appraisals are not open for public inspection. So the way we've typically handled that within the RDC is to give you an update about what the property we would potentially target in executive session, give you an idea of these are the appraisals that are coming, notify you of what the average of the two appraisals are, the results of the appraisals. And then in the public session, when it comes time to actually approve that purchase or approve the sale of it, is to have you explicitly approve any purchase agreement and note that whether it's above the average of the two appraisals and how you're doing that. And what we've inquired about and learned from our outside counsel, that is by far how a majority or most redevelopment commissions work around the state. And so it doesn't exactly fit from the way the code has developed in terms of how that list is used and what it's used for in terms of when we're talking about private negotiated sales of property versus kind of more development focus where you were going to exercise eminent domain.
So in terms of the two appraisals that are gotten for, let's say, property that's being considered for acquisition by the RDC, how are those then supposed to be used in terms of how it complies with the statute, in the sense of, obviously, the RDC has the prerogative to make an offer above those two, but what is the role that those two appraisals are intended to play in terms of any initial offer price or other considerations for the acquisition of a property?
So one, it's to inform you broadly of what the value is. So first of all, where's the starting point for that value? What are comparable sales? What are aspects of this property that you might look at historically? So whether there's any former usage that might signal environmental contamination that might change the property price, whether it is an income generating property where there's lease agreements and things like that. Those are kind of the way those appraisals are used. There are a lot of sensitive information and material in those appraisals. And so I think that that's why the General Assembly has made those largely not for public consumption, because you're receiving a lot of information about a particular parcel. You're basically, it informs your entire strategy about how you're going to negotiate that private sale. And then it does set the price point. So the initial offer for us is no more than that average of the two appraisals for an initial offer. Now, if we go back and forth, as you know, we try to keep you apprised as we go and kind of talk to you about where the negotiation is, whether we feel like that's an appropriate value for it, and what the considerations there. And, honestly, those appraisals, again, are that starting point that you're seeing. This is where we started from. This is the base that we think it's worth. This is what has been accepted or offered or something like that, and whether you ultimately approve that price. And you are unique. Let me just say this point. You are unique in the way that it's structured with municipalities, in that this is the only entity that can authorize a price above the average of the two appraisals. The city generally, if it's operating under its Board of Public Works, is limited. There is no exception to the average of the two appraisals. Parks, for instance, is limited to the average of the two appraisals. And that's the limitation that the state has put in place, but has not for redevelopment commissions. Which kind of, again, if you think start getting more philosophical about our purpose, which you brought up earlier, Commissioner Meyerson, just in terms of how the elements of what a TIF district is created for, how it's meant to foster further development, kind of makes sense. But why that flexibility has not been built into city council, for instance, I really can't answer intelligibly because I'm not sure.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand in terms of my initial part of my question about approving and adopting a list of real property. You were saying that it was originally based in the powers of eminent domain, which have since been superseded. So is there not supposed to be a list anymore because it seems like it would be useful public knowledge to have such a list, but it seems like that's not how it's currently done, and I'm just trying to understand the discrepancy.
We don't adopt a list for private negotiated property acquisition.
Okay. Is there a list for other purposes?
If you were to take on a project area, a very specific project area where the plan was you were going to somehow work with city council in acquiring it, there might be a purpose behind adopting that list.
Okay. And in terms of that interpretation of a list for private negotiated property, I certainly understand the argument you've presented, but I'm not sure if I fully understand if that's, again, an interpretation based on that code, because it's not clear that there's that exception made in the code, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm trying to just get a grip on how this is supposed to work, how the city is implementing it, and how the code's written.
Yeah, so there's always interpretation, regardless of the way these work, and that's kind of why we make sure that we're consulting others. I mean, we're not just doing it like shoot from the hip kind of thing and hope it works out. You know, we do bring in outside counsel. We do try to make sure that we're doing the best by both clearly what the statute intends, and also giving us like the ability to operate within our city and make it better. So I think that that's also why I wanted to have additional resources for you for a broader discussion, just so you have those opportunities to ask others, so you hear voices other than mine, just on that interpretation as well. Because that's a part of the balancing process. I don't want to go too broad with it, but like even when we're talking about like judgments about what is in or serving the TIF and what does that mean and how does that work, you know, my response, I'll just tell you my philosophy is like, I'm happy to get a second opinion. Like I have an ego, but I don't have that much of an ego about that particular thing. I want to do what's right at the end of the day, and so we try to consult with people and try to triangulate on what's going to be the best approach for you.
Sure. Is it any way to share some of that with the RDC directly? Just because it's obviously questions that we have as well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why, you know, I said make people available for you to ask questions and get some of that information. And we've shared some of it publicly as well.
Sure. Is there any state level kind of training available for our RDC commissioners to become more acquainted with some of the ins and outs, you know, from a lay perspective as opposed to a legal angle? I mean, obviously overlapping in terms of good faith compliance with state code, but.
Yeah, I don't know if AIM has that. So AIM is in terms of the body of Indiana municipalities might do it. I don't think it happens from the like DLGF or the State Board of Accounts or anything like that. But there might be something from AIM that we could look into and ask about.
Okay, I'd appreciate that, and I'll look into it myself as well.
Okay.
Thank
Let me
you.
know if you find anything too.
Sure.
We can race to whatever the result
good.
is.
Thank you.
And we also talked about, I'm just circling back on something we talked about a long time ago, for instance, going up to Carmel and having an exchange with the Carmel Redevelopment Commission to see how they do that, how they do development, how they approach their meetings and things like that. I think that that's useful. It's not something I've forgotten about, Commissioner Cassidy, so just so you know, it's been something that I think as the weather gets nicer and kind of facilitates us actually touring some of the areas that they've developed, that might be a good idea just to have that kind of exchange. Because
I would find that really valuable too, so I appreciate that, renewing that suggestion.
And so is there, to your knowledge, are there any redevelopment commissions in Indiana that still abide by this idea of like a public list before they go about negotiating contracts?
As I sit here, I don't know.
Okay. And are you aware of any case law that has developed off of this statute that would give some indication of how courts are interpreting this statute, given that it sounds like the initial reason for this particular portion of the statute is no longer valid, given the fact that we no longer have the ability to exercise eminent domain?
Yeah, there isn't much case law in this. That obviously would be the first place I would go to besides the statute to look at, to see how I would evaluate this and kind of interpret it. And that's one of the challenges that we run into generally in functioning in this area is there's just not a lot of case law developed about it. Now, we've had cases handed down, for instance, for the expenditure of TIF funds, right? So that's where we get, like, you can't use it for purely maintenance funds, those kind of things. That's not necessarily dictated by the interpretation of statute. That's been dictated by case law that we look at. But in this particular area, in the case law that I've looked at, there's nothing interpreting this specific statute. That doesn't mean I want to caveat that, of course, by saying if there's something I'm unaware of, I'll happily have my comeuppance and consult that. But I've searched and I just didn't see anything.
Is there any sense that there are groups within Indiana, with different municipalities and so forth, who are requesting that it seems like the state legislature could go back and amend statute to make it clearer? Is there anything along those lines? I mean, that is being discussed or not?
Maybe I'll just be really frank, if I can be, and just understand that this is a little bit of me personally speaking, just in my limited experience while I've been here. a lot of what we're doing at the state level is playing defense with restrictions on further restricting the way cities can use TIF funds and how those can be used in certain projects. Because there's always bills that come through, but those bills largely are to either phase out TIF districts directly or to just place serious restrictions on it. Every once in a while, there's something more benign that comes up, but I know we've talked to AIM about this. We talk to AIM regularly, AIM being the Association of Indiana Municipalities that kind of lobbies on our behalf at the state level. We have talked to them about our interest in going forward, how it's used, what makes sense. It's just that a lot of their time has ended up taken up by these other considerations of the way TIF funds are being. It's not that it's a bad suggestion.
You don't want to open up statute if it could end up creating a bigger problem.
Well, I think that's the other reason why you don't see like a big clarion call from every city is kind of like, once you invite the General Assembly to meddle, you may not have control over what the result is. And I don't mean our General Assembly is doing a poor job or anything like that. That's kind of the reality that we're facing.
Sausage rolls.
All right, anything else for general discussion as we move the time a little bit later here?
Okay, real quick question in regards to Mr. Underwood's gone. The aspect of our consolidated TIFs and the dollars that are in the ones, I'm assuming we'll get a report, in June or so, in regards to what those dollars are.
We have to file an annual report. That's really an upload, just to, let's be clear about what an annual report is. It's an upload to the state filing system.
Okay.
We haven't put that together with the annual presentation that we do.
Yeah, I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, as we move forward and approve these projects that, have, certain economic indicators, I just want to look where the funding aspect of it is, and something that was brought up in regards to, and the bonding issues where parks, which is a very vital part of our community as a whole, will expend their money, their bond issue. And when we look at some of the things that parks has that create the quality of life, the redevelopment as we move forward, I'll just use the example of our pools, which, provide recreation and quality of life. If something happened and they needed that, would we be able to allocate any funds to those particular projects? I mean, based on what I heard on Griffey, and then we may run out of bonds. I'm just looking at where the dollars are, or specifically even Hopewell as we develop that particular area to make sure that we have funds to care for things in the manner that we all find necessary to get that quality of our community.
So when we're talking about things like park bonds, just really briefly, we're also talking about bonds that come from different places, have different limitations. So the bonds that Mr. Street was talking about come from as part of the Parks Authority to issue bonds and count sometimes toward the general bonding limitation of the city, which kind of can limit the amount. Okay. And so the way we've done some of those general bonds is to list out our projects that the bonds would be for, to make sure that we're legally covering everything that you could potentially expend it for, understanding that the reality is that there's going to be a prioritization of those, right, and that you're probably going to expend those limited amount of bonds funds. That's separate from the RDC's bonding authority, which largely comes from TIF revenue and what kind of excess TIF revenue. I will tell you that we make sure that we have that capacity to cover both emergencies, any kind of major expenditures, but also have some bonding capacity left for the RDC, because you don't know what's going to come forward. But I think that that's a great suggestion. I'll make sure Mr. Underwood knows, but ahead of that annual report, as we get closer to that he can present that to you, so you know what those amounts would be.
The pool of money that we see from a cash flow standpoint to make sure we can, maintain the quality of which we have. And maintenance is always important, so, okay, appreciate it.
So just to follow up on that, before you guys present a project for approval through the RDC, it's been balanced and we know that there's funds available.
Yeah, so
there's a process ahead of time.
That's correct. So the controller's office looks very carefully at those projects before you get the project review form, which is before you even approve the actual funds themselves. So there is a review process that goes not just through Mr. Underwood, but also other people in his office to make sure we have those funds.
Okay.
So, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, anything else for general discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. And a second?
Second.
All right, good night, everyone.